some of you a little bit over the last few months when I've been coming and doing prayer after service, and I appreciate getting to know you and listening and knowing who you are and hearing your struggles and hearing your joys. It's been such a joy. And I want you to know a little bit more about who I am, because that's not fair. I don't tell you who I am, and you don't know me. So maybe some of you may have surmised by my introduction why peace is personal to me and why it's perfect. And I'll happily expound, but what I want to ask first is, what does peace look like and feel like to you today? And I'd like you to take a moment to just consider your own peace place. That place of feeling and remembering the thoughts that lead you there. Because that place is always available. And if there are parts of my talk that are triggering or challenging, that peace, I ask that you try to lean in. Listen for the truth. Listen for your own truth. Listen for your connection to that. And remember that place of calm and oneness that is always available. The founder of Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, would say that peace and abundance and joy are always, always possible. And it is your birthright, and it is your choice, no matter what is happening in the physical world. There is a place in your spirit where no harm has ever come. And it is always, always available. So I'm going to talk about some people, and I'm going to throw myself into that people category, but everyone else you probably have heard of, they're famous. The first two are the most celebrated 20th century leaders for peace and nonviolence. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And their commitment to change through nonviolent and peaceful means is honored every year for 64 days between January 30th and April 4th during the season for nonviolence. That's what it's called. And today, we are at the midpoint, 32 days in, of that season. And I'll share some of their struggles and some of their words and some of their triumphs that help bend the arc of time toward justice. And I will call on my own personal journey to chaplaincy and ministry by telling a few stories that may kind of show you how my heart broke, and my heart broke open and healed. And I'll close with an honoring of one of my favorite female heroes for peace, Congresswoman Jeanette Rankin. Peace is possible, and peace is personal. And it leads me to the story. And, you know, I listen to Joel Osteen sometimes, maybe some of you do, and he always starts out with a joke, and I try to find a joke about peace. And it's really not very funny, you know, so this is the one that I found. Feel free to not laugh. Why do peacemakers make very poor investigative policemen? Because they're only looking for harmony. That's bad. That's bad. Okay. The Season for Nonviolence was really established in 1988 to bring light to the nonviolent struggles of two men who advocated for nonviolence throughout their lives and led social movements for change through peaceful means. The season is 64 days between the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi on January 30th and Martin Luther King on April 4th. So these men who struggled for change in a world that they knew was unjust, but their personal so in peace, with nonviolent protests and actions. And in researching this talk, I learned something about Mahatma Gandhi I didn't know, and maybe some of you already knew this. He was born in India, and he was raised a Hindu. He went to England and studied law and became a lawyer. And he moved to South Africa, where he actually did so much work and so much internal work on justice, on a non-apartheid movement, that he felt called to go back to India. And he at that point wanted a more free and equal India, and at that time it was still ruled by Britain, and he led many non-violent protests to free India from British rule. It took a while, and it took some deaths of people, and it worked. He didn't stop there, because after Britain left India, there was a lot of religious turmoil and a lot of religious violence between the Hindu majority and the Muslim minority. And because of that, the Muslims were pushed and requested to go to Pakistan, and they were given by the British Pakistan. And India was to remain a Hindu majority. And Mahatma Gandhi advocated for the end of religious violence, because there was a lot of bad blood that was going on, a lot of violence. And he went to the border areas that was very dangerous, and he was assassinated while attending an interfaith prayer meeting in 1947. And he was famous for saying, "There is no way to peace. Peace is the way." I love that story, and just feel from the man just such integrity and willingness to truly put his life on the line for something that he believed in so deeply. Martin Luther King Jr., I knew better, and probably most of us know a little bit better, a Baptist minister, an eloquent orator, a fierce advocate for racial equality and justice, and he's celebrated with a federal holiday in the United States, close to his January birthday. He led many protests, resistance, and advocated for change through nonviolent civil disobedience. He also lent support to the end of the war in Vietnam and began the Poor People's Campaign. He was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. And about peace, he said, "Peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal." And I believe he was a student of Mahatma Gandhi. He studied the ways of peace. And I remembered after he was assassinated, I remember that time. I was a teenager, living in a very white Sonoma County, sheltered from the racial tensions of some parts of the United States, and a whole country removed from the massive riots in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Detroit, that followed his murder. But I felt such a deep, deep sadness of the times and the unrest, love and love that was in some places going on here today. Now I'm going to share a little bit of my personal story, which, not that I'm in the same category with Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., but it brings it to me. I have to be honest. How did I come to peace? Because no one goes through this life unscathed. And we have all suffered some level of trauma. And I'm not going to regale you with my trauma stories, which, if truth be told, can be kind of juicy and on many levels, heartbreaking and heartrending. What I want to tell is how I came through the violence to a place of peace. My early childhood was filled with fighting and meanness and violence at the hands of my father, who was a decorated World War II pilot, who undoubtedly suffered with PTSD and who self-medicated with alcohol. He eventually took his own life with a handgun in front of my mother. I was 8 years old. And while I do carry scars from that experience, it has given me a deep, deep empathy for other people whose lives carry wounds. It caused me to seek healing and a connection to other people and a higher power to be of service to the world. I chose medicine to understand myself and my family, and I was able to do well in school and become a physician assistant in 1986. And not surprisingly, I worked at the VA Medical Center in Reno for 22 years, caring for veterans, many of whom had wounds like my father. I loved working with veterans and found in helping others, I was able to heal. I'm eternally grateful for those experiences and people. And during that time, I was recruited to serve in the local Nevada Air National Guard unit as a PA in 1994, becoming their first female PA in Nevada. And I had many adventures between 94 and 2001, flying to remote locations throughout the United States and the world providing health care, which opened my mind, opened my heart, and opened my spirit to what else, to other people who are suffering. After 9/11, I served on full-time active duty for a total of 3 years, with 2 tours to active war zones, one in Iraq in 2005 and one in Afghanistan in 2008. The war experience fundamentally changed me, as it does everyone, in its own way. And my deep belief in a merciful and loving divine God was questioned. But I found that faith, I knew in my soul that there was a higher power guiding the world, no matter what it looked like. I'd already been in Science of Mind for 12 years at that point. And my local church that I had been going to, they asked me what I wanted. And they'd send me packets of lemonade, because that's all I could think of, that we put in the water. Because the cases of water that they would send to us, because we couldn't drink the local water, would sit out on the tarmac in plastic bottles at 120 degrees heat. And you could not, really didn't want to drink it. So we put little, remember Crystal Light, the little packets of lemonade, put that in the water, and we'd get it down. It was in those receiving trauma rooms of the wars that I came closely in contact with the military chaplains, who would show up at all hours whenever the military helicopters landed with the wounded. And I don't know if any of you remember MASH and that sound of the opening thing, and people are running out to the helicopters, and there's that opening music, and I could hear it. I could see the helicopters landing, and I go, there's the MASH theme going on. And the chaplains held the presence and held the hands of the wounded and dying, whether they were Allied troops, civilians, or enemy combatants, or us who were providing care. The chaplains were the only ones whose calling to service spoke to me in those moments. That is why and how I survived. That is why peace is personal to me. I fully retired in 2014, or so I thought. I returned to school in 2018, attended Star King School for the Ministry and the Chaplaincy Institute, and received my clinical chaplain training at Sutter Roseville. I was accepted in their program and served from October, I think the dates, October 2020 through June of 2023. The only time I did not wear a mask or a full bodysuit into COVID rooms was the last week of my time at Sutter Roseville. So yes, it was during the pandemic, and yes, again, my faith and community of my church and my fellow chaplains carried me, the connection to the humanity of that, and comforted me as we all navigated a challenging time and a global pandemic. In retrospect, all of my learning and challenges and mistakes, as well as successes, have brought me to an incredibly grateful place of peace and wonder. And I'm alive today, standing before you. It has been my greatest joy and honor to walk alongside and be present with people, both patients and families, in their pain and suffering, as well as their love. I know that I'm made for these times, and I hold a vision and work for a vision of world peace. So that's kind of a heavy time. I'm going to talk about somebody who I admire. And I didn't learn about her. Her name is Jeanette Rankin. And I first learned about Jeanette Rankin in the late 1970s while I was attending University of Montana in Missoula, which is a whole other story, and I'm not going to that. I was amazed that I'd never heard of her. I grew up in Nevada and California, and yes, I knew, and as all of you have been taught, the Donner Party. I knew more about the Donner Party than I knew about Jeanette Rankin. She was famous throughout her life for many achievements. She was the first female to be elected to federal office in 1916 to the House of Representatives from the state of Montana. And this is before women in the country had the right to vote. Wow. And Montana, because of her work, had given women the right to vote before the country could. She said she was proud that she was the only woman to vote to give other women the right to vote. She also famously, in 1918, she voted against Americans' entry into World War I and maintained her pacifist convictions and actions all of her life. She was not reelected to Congress the next time, and until 1940, when she was again elected to Congress and became the only vote out of all of the Congress to vote against America's entry into World War II, and said, as a woman, I cannot go to war, and I refuse to send anyone else. So this one, I think it was important that I didn't know about. How come I didn't know about her? The only person to vote against war entry into World War I and World War II. Her anti-war stance again cost her re-election, but she continued her pacifism and anti-war action, and she marched against the war in Vietnam in 1973 at the age of 93. She led the march. To her, peace was personal and possible, and she said, "We seem always ready to pay the price of war. Almost gladly we give our time, our treasures, our limbs, and even our lives for war, but we expect peace for nothing." I've been influenced by studying peace and nonviolence. I've been influenced by and moved by courageous leaders who've made stands for peace, and I am reminded of a rich history of others, thinkers, poets, artists, musicians, philosophers, religious leaders who continue to envision the world at peace, even at great personal danger and loss. And I lend my voice today, and I take a stand for peace in a world that works for everyone. Thank you for letting me share my piece on peace, and please feel free to talk to me afterwards. I'll answer any questions. Well, I'll answer most questions. Text, call, my contact number is there. And my passion really is not to be a speaker, but to be a listening chaplain. So thank you for your attention and kindness. And I'm going to close with a short piece about inner peace. If you can start the day without caffeine, if you can always be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can eat some food every day and be grateful for it, if you can understand when your loved ones are too busy to give you any time, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without alcohol, if you can sleep without drugs, then you're probably the family dog.